Yeah, so what I'm working on today is a 2012 Honda Civic GX. This car runs on natural gas. This is the only one I've ever worked on that runs on natural gas. And this car either has a cracked head or a blown head gasket. And the easy way to tell, this car won't even run, so we know there's a big problem here. Hey, you take the radiator cap up. So now we get in the car and crank it over. Oh, this time it didn't do it. All the other times I did that, it had a bunch of pressure on it just from cranking it over. And that's how you can tell if it's got a blown head gasket. If they just barely leak, then there's other ways you can't do it that way. But since this one won't run, and it looks like the radiator, I think, and the radiator have just been replaced. Yeah, and you can see the weird exhaust manifold on this. It's part of the cylinder head, and the catalytic converter just bolts right to the head. If you can see that. So the first thing I'm going to do is pull the coils off and the valve cover and the exhaust manifold off of it. Yeah, and here's how that catalytic converter bolts right to the head. And if you get a car that, I've explained this in other videos, if you get a car where it runs pretty good, but you know there's something going on and you can't figure out that you got a cylinder head issue, what you do is you take it by a place that does emissions testing. They take the radiator cap off, they start it up, and they hold the probe right next to where the radiator cap goes. And if it shows any hydrocarbons, it's bad. I know some people say, why don't you use that blue chemical? It turns yellow. That's a completely worthless test, is why I never use that. It'll only show up if it's real bad. And if you get one that's real bad, you don't even need that to figure that out. Yeah, and I'm only going to show the technical stuff on this because the video would be too long if I showed everything. And it looks like somebody replaced two of the coils. They probably had a misfire in those two cylinders that coolant's leaking into them. And they didn't know why. Yeah, and when you unbolt the catalytic converter from the head, there's also a mount down there near the bottom. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, I got the intake manifold off. There's 3 bolts on the bottom and 3 on the top. And you also have to take the fuel rail off of the injectors in it. I'm going to leave it sitting back there for now. Yeah, so next there's a couple of hoses back here on the back of the intake. Then this piece the thermostat's in needs to come off of here. Because when you take the head to them anyways, everything's got to be off of it. Yeah, so I got all the hoses off this side of the intake. I just unbolted these pieces off the head, I mean. So next what I'm going to have to do is take the motor mount out of there and take everything off the front of the engine and take the front cover off so I can get the timing chain off. And then I'm ready to unbolt the head after that. And I took the alternator off. It just gives more room to get to everything. You don't actually have to take that off. And the harmonic balancer, it came off real easy on this. Not like some of these Hondas where you got to use a 1-inch impact on it. And I think I'm going to go ahead and replace the water pump too. Yeah, and to get this front cover off, you either have to take this idler off back here for the belt or the water pump. One of the two. It won't come out of here with them on there. Yeah, with that belt idler out of there, the front cover came right out of there. Yeah, it's got the oil pump in the front cover. So what I like to do next is line the timing marks up before I take the chain and the tensioner off. Yeah, and with the timing marks on this, there's an up mark on the cam sprocket. There's also, it's going to be difficult to see this on camera. There's 2 little lines here, and that's going to go flat with the head. And then down here, there's 2 little marks, and this goes across right where the main bearing cap goes on. There's another one on the other side. That's why it's always best to figure out how this lines up before you take it apart. Yeah, it's going to be real hard to see that. Yeah, and I just took the tensioner out of there. There's just 2 bolts for that. Now these 2 guides need to come out of here. There's 3 bolts on one, and there's one on this one that moves. Yeah, so now I'm removing all the head bolts, and it's a 14 millimeter 12-point socket to do that. I've already loosened all of them up. Yeah, I got the head off. And one thing you'll notice about this natural gas engine is the domes on the top of the pistons. It must have real high compression. And you'll also notice how clean everything is. There's not a bunch of carbon in there like a gas engine. And what I have to do is take this head apart and then take it and have it serviced and pressure tested. Yeah, another thing you always want to make sure is the dowel pins are stuck in the block and not in the head. And if they are, take them out of the head before you take it to the machine shop so they don't get lost. Yeah, now I'm taking the head apart. Yeah, if you bring the head to the machine shop assembled, they'll charge you to take it apart. So it's best that you do that yourself. And then I always set everything out how it goes. And when you pull this piece off, 4 springs are going to fall out of there, so you've got to make sure you don't lose those. So after you get this piece off the rocker arm shafts in it, to get the cam out, all you do is take the sprocket loose and it comes out through the back side then. Yeah, so I had the head surfaced and pressure tested. I just got to go pick it up tomorrow. So what I'm going to do now is go over the block with this surface prep tool. And this is one of the medium Scotch-Brite pads. You don't want to use the coarse ones or you'll damage it. And with this one, the dowel pins come out easy, so I'm going to pull those out first. And if you get an engine that the dowel pins don't come out easy, just go around it. And I'm also going to clean the other stuff up. There's just a few other, most of the stuff's made out of plastic except the head and the front cover, the timing chain cover. Yeah, and I bought the head set and most of the other parts. I also had to buy what they call a conversion set, and that comes with gaskets for the front cover because the head set doesn't come with those timing chain cover gaskets. There's just a couple of them on it. Mostly it's got gasket sealer, but I wanted the front seal also. Yeah, so I got it all cleaned up. Yeah, I also went over the timing chain cover too. Yeah, so tomorrow I can start actually putting this back together. Yeah, and this is how you hold the timing chain tensioner back, just by putting a thumbtack in there. Yeah, and the engine in this car is an R18A9. And I guess and this is a 1.8 liter engine. The engines that are used in the regular gas cars are R18Z1. Yeah, I just got the head back. I had it surfaced and pressure tested. It checks out to be okay. Yeah, now I'm ready to assemble the head. And you always want to set this down on cardboard so you don't scratch the surface up. And I also just got the conversion set that comes with the front cover, timing chain cover gaskets and seal. Hey, I always like to lubricate the camshaft with a little bit of oil before I stick it in the hole. And you're just going to do that on the journals here. I know I don't have a lot of room here. I got too many projects going on. I'm surprised this came out this way. There it goes. And this sprocket gets tightened down to 42 foot-pounds. Yeah, I'm going to take you off the tripod. And how you're going to do that is right here you can put a wrench on it to hold this from turning, and then I'll do this off camera. So now I'm ready to put the rocker arm shafts on here, and you have to be very careful with this. I almost lost some pieces here. Right in here there's a little spring and a plunger. There's 4 of them in here, and they can fall out real easy. Also, when you put the rocker arm shafts on, make sure none of the ends are catching the valves here. If they are, when you tighten this down, it will bend the valves if like it's way out. If you got the adjusting nut out here. Let me see if I can show you how this would look. If it's going together like that, it'll bend the valves. So you got to be careful. So next is this piece that goes on top, but you also have to get these springs in here at the same time. And this part will go down to where it's hitting against the rocker arm. And that just holds pressure on everything so that all the rollers are staying on the cam all the time. You see that little cap? Make sure it goes down against the rocker arms. Then the camshaft position sensor goes in the rear of the head right here. This cover also goes on here. And it's got a cutout part for the camshaft position sensor to go through that. Yeah, and you also have this bracket. I took these 2 studs out, I just put back in. Yeah, it's best to take as much stuff off the head as you can before you take it to the machine shop. Then there's this heat shield and this one other piece that goes on here. I hope the gaskets are there. Okay, this gasket is in the headset, and it's for this piece that bolts to the front of the head by where the intake manifold bolts. And in my videos, I don't show every detail because these videos are not targeted for a DIYer. It's for just somebody that needs a little bit of extra help. A job like this, a DIYer should not do this anyways. Yeah, so now I'm ready to put the head on. And how you torque the head is you start with the middle of the head and you work your way out. And I got this information off of ALLDATA. The first step is 30 foot-pounds. The second step is 90 degrees. The third step is 90 degrees. And if you're using new head bolts, then there's a 4th step and you go 60 more degrees. And on cars where I can't turn the ratchet far enough each time, what I'll do is I'll mark the heads of the bolts. But with this car, there's plenty of room where I can go 90 degrees at each time. And I always take the head bolts and I put a little never seize on the washer and the head and a little bit on the threads. That way on the first step there's no friction there and it'll get the proper 30 foot-pounds of torque. Yeah, and how I do this is I tighten all the bolts down until they just touch, and then I'll go and torque everything. Yeah, so I got the head all torqued. So now I'm ready to put the timing chain and guides on. Yeah, so both of the guides are in there. The one that moves uses a 6mm Allen socket. And you see the keyway on the crankshaft, it's facing up. And it's very hard to see this in here. And on the cam sprocket, there's a mark that says up on it. And there's 2 little marks that they kind of line up with this part here. And on the crank sprocket, there's a little arrow at the top. It's hard to see this. And it points towards that arrow in the aluminum casting. And then there's 2 little flat spots here that go right on the crack where the bearing cap is. And if you look at the timing chain, there's 2 links that are a different color, both one on each end, and those are going to line up with 2 marks on the sprockets. It's just like a Ford Triton engine, so if you're timing chain those marks, you can't see them anymore, you can take a Sharpie and mark the 2 end links and do that. That's how I do the Ford Triton engines. You can see how this shiny link here points right towards that mark. The other mark that wasn't used before for nothing. It's very difficult to see this in here. But it's this link right here, and it points towards that mark that's at about 8 o'clock position. And then the shiny mark here, it points towards right this mark. It's at about 1 o'clock. And that's how everything's lined up right. And the best way to do this is before you take it apart, always line everything up and look at how everything goes. Then you'll know exactly how it goes. I get cars sometimes with timing belts that somebody's put it on wrong because they didn't even look and just took the old one off. Yeah, I also just put the tensioner in there and then pulled the thumbtack out of it to release it. So now what you always do with it, if you're replacing a timing chain or a timing belt, you turn the engine over by hand 2 times to make sure nothing hits before you put it back together. So you don't bend the valves or do something wrong. Okay, when you turn it over 2 revolutions, that up mark on the camshaft sprocket should be facing up again. And another way you can tell if you got everything lined up right is if you have the crankshaft sprocket, the marks lined up with a little arrow, and you put the timing chain cover on here, just hold it up to the engine. Those 2 little marks you should see. You can't really see this, but there's 2 little marks that should line up with this edge here. Yeah, I'm going to take and clean the timing chain cover out and put the new seal on it. Yeah, and with the conversion set, it comes with these O-rings. And it also even comes with the rear main seal, which we won't need. And on this, all you do is put a gasket sealer on here. And what I recommend is this ultra gray gasket sealer. This is the best stuff. The Toyota and Honda uses it on everything, even like on the oil pans. Yeah, I'm going to put this little cover back on. It goes on the other side of the timing chain cover. That covers up where the timing chain tensioner is. I actually didn't even need to take it off. And that just is held on with a gasket sealer only. Yeah, but it kind of looked like it was leaking, so it probably needed to come off anyways. Yeah, and here's where that little cover goes. Yeah, and on these O-rings, you can put a little bit of grease or gasket sealer on here so they don't fall out when you go to put the cover on. Yeah, the timing chain cover's on and the harmonic balancer. And the easiest way to get the balancer on there, since it has to line up with the oil pump, is to put the balancer on there first, then turn it until the keyway lines up and put the key in the crankshaft and then put the bolt in. Yeah, next this idler goes in here and it goes on the back side of the engine. Yeah, and here's where that idler goes on the back side of the engine, exactly opposite of the water pump. Yeah, next I'm going to bolt the water outlet back up to the cylinder head. And for me moving this around, I better replace the 2 O-rings in here that go on this pipe that goes from the water pump to it. And it comes with those in the headset. Yeah, if I don't, it might leak. Yeah, and here's what this pipe looks like when it's out of there. Yeah, I got the water outlet back on there. And I put a little bit of gasket sealer on the O-rings and it slides in easy and it doesn't leak. So now I'm ready to put the exhaust back on. And you don't want to use these Velcro gaskets that come with these gasket sets. If you do, in 6 months' time the bolts will come loose and it'll leak. You want to put the original gasket back in there. It's made out of metal. And if you do actually want to replace this, you have to go to Honda to buy the correct gasket. Yeah, next I'm going to put the belt tensioner back on. You'll need an 8mm Allen socket to do that. Yeah, and I got the alternator and everything on the front of the engine and the belt on it. And this Gates belt app works good to figure out how the belt goes back on there. Yeah, and this piece goes on there next. And this just has gasket sealer on there. There's no gasket that goes in here. This piece back here that goes back on the head. And that actually comes with a new gasket that goes in there. Yeah, one of the fans is bad. Yeah, I didn't even realize that until I dropped the socket and had to reach down in there. Yeah, I got the intake manifold back on. There's 6 bolts on the top of the intake, or 3 on the top of the intake, 3 underneath, and then there's 1 bracket way down near the bottom that supports it. Yeah, next I'm going to put this motor mount back in here now, because I don't need to move the engine around anymore. Yeah, it's right here. Yeah, so I got the motor mount back in there. There's also this bracket that goes here. And so next I think I'm going to put the valve cover on, then I can get all this wiring back on there right. Yeah, I got the valve cover and the coils on there. It also came with new rubber seals that go around the coils. I put 2 of them on there because 2 of the coils that somebody had replaced before. Yeah, next I'll put the throttle body and all this wiring I'll hook back up, that's very easy to do. So about all I have left that I can actually do right now is change the oil, and I can put that skid plate back on and the wheel back on it, and I'll start it up for a minute. I still got to find that fan, and it looks like they don't have it anywhere. I'm going to have to special order that. Yeah, I got it running. The first time I tried to start it, it was real hard to start. I forgot to plug in the camshaft position sensor. That's why it's always a good idea to plug a scan tool into a car after you do a job this big to it, just to make sure you plugged all the wires in. Yeah, I just got the new fan, so now I can finally finish this car. Another thing I noticed that's a bit different on this car is when I changed the oil, the old oil came out and looked really clean. I guess because these engines are supposed to run much cleaner than gas engines. Yeah, I got it all together now and it's running. Yeah, and anytime I do a job where I drain the coolant out, I like to run it until, with the heater on until it starts blowing hot air out. And that way I know there's no air pockets trapped in the engine. Yeah, and here's how you put gas in this thing. Yeah, and I heard the trunk is very small in these too. Let's see. Yeah, so that gas tank takes up almost the whole entire trunk space. Yeah, so it's all finished now.